Have you ever played with toy trains? It is so much fun. And sometimes you get it going so fast and it hits a curve in the track and it derails, it falls off the track. And it's not a big deal with toy trains because you just put it back on the track and you keep going. But when that happens to real trains, it's a really big deal and it's scary and it can cause a lot of damage. When a train derails, it can be a really bad thing. Um, I wonder, have you ever been in a situation where you messed up so badly? You wondered if you had derailed God's plan, if you'd messed up so badly that you'd messed up God's purpose and God's plan. That's what we're going to talk about today. And the truth is, actions do have consequences, and we can miss God's blessings because of unbelief. But we're also going to look at, can we derail God's plans and really mess up what he intended? That's the question of the day as we study this passage in First Kings 1 and 2. Hi friends, I'm Miss Nancy Ruth.
And I'm Mr. Roger.
We want to see kids living for Jesus. So, first let's check the context to make sure we know where we're at. David has been king for 40 years and he is old and on his deathbed. He is really sick. And they bring in Abishag the Shunammite, and she becomes his nurse and also his sort of concubine, which is a lesser wife. And remember, God had made a covenant with David and said that when your days are over, when you pass away, God will raise up an offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and establish his kingdom. He will be the one who will build a house for my name, not you, David. And he will be, I will be his father, and he will be my son. So David has been stockpiling all the supplies needed for the house of the Lord so that his son can build it. And he made a promise to Bathsheba, his wife, saying, Solomon, your son, shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne. Problem is, he didn't make that announcement public. He didn't publicly announce that Solomon is going to be the next king. So that's kind of up in the air now. And some people, most people probably assumed that his oldest son would take on the role of his father when his father passed on. Okay, well, we know Absalom was David's third son, and he died, and Amnon died, and we assume the other of the top three died because the oldest son now is Adonijah, who's David's fourth son. And then keep on going, and a much younger son is Solomon. So, question is, who will become the next king? Just a reminder, if you would like a family discussion guide for this passage, you can click the QR code or grab the link on the screen or in the description. Okay, so who's going to be the next king and how's all this going to work out? Well, Adonijah decided, in fact, he declared, I will be the next king. That's what he announced. And actually, it doesn't say at this point he announced it, but it was clear he was telling people because he got some chariots together, which is kind of like the ancient tanks, right? And he got 50 men to follow him around like they would a king. And so he's doing all this stuff right under his dad's nose, and his dad doesn't say anything. So remember, actions have consequences. And in this case, David's inaction, his lack of action, has consequences too. And in this case, it confuses people because they assume, okay, well, David's not saying anything. Maybe this is the way it's going to go. So, I forgot his name already. That's not good. Adonijah invited Joab and Abiathar and all of his brothers, except for Solomon, as well as all the leaders of the tribe of Judah. And he invited them all to En Rogel, which is on the Judah side of the Judah-Benjamin border, right there. See how close it is to Jerusalem? Let me make that bigger so you can see. So he invited them all to this place, and they had a whole bunch of sacrifices that Adonijah offered. And this was the first step to him becoming king. And then they had this big party, and Adonijah, long live King Adonijah, and have this celebration, of this new king. Okay. Well, Nathan hears the party going on and finds out what's happening, and obviously he's concerned. He knows about this promise to Bathsheba. So he goes to Bathsheba, and the two of them decide what to do. In fact, Nathan tells Bathsheba what to do. So she goes into King David, and She says to him, "My lord, you yourself swore to me, your servant, by the Lord your God, that Solomon your son shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne. You remember your promise, king? But now Adonijah has become king, and you, my lord the king, do not know about it." So they're assuming he doesn't know about it because he's old and in his sick bed. And we don't know if he had found out or not. Anyway, Bathsheba goes on to explain, he has offered sacrificed great numbers of cattle, fattened calves, and sheep. And he has invited all the king's sons, except for Solomon, Abiathar the priest, Joab the commander of the army, which means he has the whole army under his control too, okay? But he has not invited Solomon, your servant. Okay, just quick time out here. The fact that Solomon was not invited to this party tells us that Adonijah knew about this promise to Bathsheba, but he didn't believe that this was actually going to happen, okay? He was trying to derail David's plans, and as a result, derail the Lord's plans and create his own and make his own what was really going to happen. All right, just so we're clear on that, let's see if he succeeds or not. All right, back to what's going on. So Bathsheba continues, "My lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are on you to learn from you who will sit on the throne of my lord the king after him." See, David was a very beloved king, and even though he was sick on his deathbed, he was still the king, and everybody knew it. Okay, he was still the one in charge. All right, and Bathsheba continues, "If you don't, otherwise, as soon as my lord the king is laid to rest with his ancestors, I and my son Solomon will be treated as criminals. In other words, they will be executed." Okay, not good. All right. And get this was part of the plan that they cooked up. While she was still speaking with the king, Nathan the prophet arrived. And the king was told, "Nathan the prophet's here." So he went before the king and bowed on his face before the ground. And he repeated the same story of what all was happening, and he added a few things. He said, "Right now they're eating and drinking with him, saying, 'Long live King Adonijah.' And he said, 'But me, your servant,'" meaning Nathan, "'and Zadok the priest, and Benaniah the son of Jehoiada,'" who was in charge of the king's bodyguard or the royal army, the ones that are directly report to David. So the greater army is with Joab, and then the king's bodyguard is under Benaniah. Okay. And your servant Solomon, he did not invite to the party. Okay. Then Nathan says something similar. He says, "Is this something the Lord the king has done without letting his servants know who should sit on the throne of my lord the king after him?" So they're being very respectful and giving him the benefit of the doubt, but saying, "You got to do something here." Okay. And in fact, David had a choice to make, and his choice had huge consequences. Was he going to honor his promise to make Solomon king, or was he not? And David did the right thing. He honored his promise, and he called Bathsheba back in, and he reaffirmed his promise, his commitment to her, that Solomon would be the next king. Then he called Zadok the priest and Nathan and Benaniah all together in the room and said, "I want you to take my bodyguard." And it's not, like a small bodyguard, like the few people pictured here. We're talking about like a division of the army. So a whole bunch of guys. All right. It was a lot of people, but take the bodyguard, and you guys go with the bodyguard. Put Solomon on my personal mule, the king's mule, and take him down to Gihon Springs, okay, which is another springs, but it's a little bit. It's actually closer to Jerusalem than En Rogel, but right there by Jerusalem, okay. And then David said, next slide. There we go. There, you're to anoint Solomon as king. Remember, David was anointed as king. Solomon should be anointed as king. Adonijah was not. Okay. Anointing is done by the prophets or the judges. Okay. Then they had this huge celebration. All the people were there, and they had musical instruments and big shouting and said, "Long live King Solomon." And in fact, the celebration was so loud that the ground shook. Okay. If you ever had the speaker's so loud that the ground is shaking. I can't do that very often, especially not anymore. It hurts your ears. But that's what was going on. And then they had this grand procession back to Jerusalem, and they put Solomon on the king's throne. in the throne room on the King David's throne. Okay, now people at the other party, the King Adonijah party, heard the loud noise, but they didn't understand the words that were being said. And they're like, what's going on? What's happening over there? And right then a messenger came up and explained everything that was happening. And obviously they were shocked, like, oh, this is bad. And the attendees, the guests of the party couldn't hightail it and leave fast enough. They were out of there so fast because they knew they were now in rebellion against what the king himself said. This is bad. So they ran. And Adonijah himself, the instigator, he ran to the tabernacle and grabbed hold of the horns of the altar because he was afraid of Solomon. He knew actions have consequences. He also knew what he intended to do to Solomon once he was king, once Adonijah was king. And he assumed that Solomon would do the same in reverse, and so he was fearing for his life. Okay. And he was there begging for mercy. And mercy is not hurting or punishing. The official dictionary definition says compassion or forgiveness shown towards someone whom it is in with it, who you have the power to punish or harm, and not doing that. Okay, that's what mercy is, not hurting or punishing, especially when it's deserved. Okay, so he's begging for mercy. He knew he didn't deserve it, but he was begging for mercy. And Solomon gave it to him. Check this out. Solomon replied, if Adonijah shows himself to be worthy, not a hair of his head will fall to the ground. But if evil is found in him, hello, puppy. If evil is found in him, he will die. Then Solomon sent men, and they brought him down from the altar. Adonijah came and bowed down before King Solomon, and Solomon said, you can go home now. Wow. All right, so get this. The Lord, through Solomon, is offering Adonijah huge blessing. A long life, he can thrive, he can marry, he can have kids, he can, live a full life, not as king, but still live a full life, if he believes. Question is, will he reject it in unbelief and try to derail God's plans again? What do you think? Let me know down in the comments, and we'll keep going and we'll find out. All right. So David is about to die, and he brings his son and tells him some final instructions. And he starts with, be strong and act like a man. In other words, don't act like a child. Be mature. Act like a grown-up. Act like, an adult. Don't be immature. Act like a man. Observe what the Lord requires of you, which is this. Walk in obedience to him. Keep his decrees and commandments, his laws and regulations, the written law of Moses, and do this so that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you go, that the Lord may keep his promise to me, which was, if your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul. Does that remind you of anything? Let me know in the comments. You will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. So his final instructions to Solomon, be strong, act like a mature adult, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him. Then David goes on to give him some more specific instructions about some people in David's life, some of whom, these are the guys he was talking about. Some of these guys received mercy during David's lifetime, and now it was time to face the consequences of their actions. And some of them had done good to David, and David was urging Solomon to continue to show kindness and generosity to them. Okay. So then David passed away, and we'll see this summary statement quite often when a king or an important person dies. So let's read this really fast together. Then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron, and 33 years in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established. Okay, then we find more specifically how that firmly established came about. Okay, remember Adonijah? The first thing he does after his dad dies is he goes to Bathsheba, thinking that maybe the mother can kind of wheedle for him. Goes to Bathsheba and asks for Abishag as his wife. Okay, let's explain why this is a big deal. You remember how David put Solomon on the king's personal mule and then had him sit on the king's personal throne? Okay, those are signs that Solomon is king. So the fact that Adonijah wanted to make David's latest concubine his wife is saying he wants to be king and he's positioning himself to be king. All right, that's what this act is doing. By asking for this woman as his wife, he's setting himself up to be king, and he's rejecting God's blessings and in unbelief. Nope, he didn't want any part of that. He's once again trying to derail God's plans and start the rebellion all up again. He's starting his campaign to be king up all over again. First thing after his dad dies. Well, Solomon knew this. He recognized this when the request was made. And he said, "Why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother." Remember, that's what people were expecting. Yes, for him and for Abiathar the priest and Joab of Zeruiah. And he's saying all these guys are going to be killed. And they were. Okay, so all of these people met the consequences for their actions. But did Adonijah derail God's plans? No. Can we? Well, let's look. Isaiah 14:27 says it so well. It says, "For the Lord Almighty has purposed." He has a plan, an overarching purpose and direction. Who can thwart him? Who can derail him? His hand is stretched out, and who can turn it back? In other words, no, we cannot derail God's plans. Our actions do have consequences. We can make choices, and our actions have consequences for us and for those in our authority. Okay? And we can miss God's blessings because of unbelief. However, we cannot derail God's overarching purposes. Okay? We're not that powerful. God's much more, God is all powerful, all knowing, all the things. He's so much bigger than we are. We can't mess up what God wants to do. Okay? And one of those purposes is to show mercy to us. He wants to show mercy to us. However, he is also completely fair and just. Watch this. God demonstrates his own love for us. While we were still sinners, while we were in rebellion against God, Christ died for us to take our punishment so that we could be declared not guilty for those who believe in him. Watch this. Since we now have been justified by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? That's how we have access to God's mercy, is through belief in Jesus Christ. It says, "For if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his son, how much more, having been reconciled, having been saved and put in a right relationship with God, will we be saved through his life?" Reconcile is put in a right relationship with God. How can we be saved? Well, let's look. If you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. It says, "For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved." Can we sin so much that God can never forgive us? Find out in this video. Don't forget to subscribe. We post memory verses in 4 translations, key passages, answers to Bible questions, and more. Check out our store and freebies at parentroadmin.com. We love you, friends. See you next time.